We are live around the world on 3news.com, and clearly we are all in readiness for tomorrow's budget, so you do need to be a part of the show. Let's know what your expectations are as we prepare to bring you full coverage here on TV3.
We begin from the Labour front, where government has granted 23% salary increment to public sector workers for the year 2024. The salary increment will cover January to June, while another increment of 25% will be implemented between July and December. The National Tripartite Committee also approved 22% increment for daily minimum wage from 14 cedis 88 pesos for 2023 to 18 cedis for 2024. This decision, he said, was arrived at taking into consideration the current economic situation in the country. The salary increment will cover January to June 2024, while another increment of 2% will be implemented for between July to December 2024. Let's speak to our Labour correspondent, Daniel Opoku, who joins us live here in the studio. Daniel, thank you so much for your time. Can you tell us what went into negotiations?
Right. So both parties made to agree on the base pay and the minimum wage. Now, usually when they meet to discuss the base pay, they have to agree on the daily minimum wage. So you have two sets of government entities coming together. You have those who belong to the National Daily Minimum Wage team, that's the National Tripartite. So you have government on one side, you have Ghana Employers Association, also have organized labor. Then when it comes to the base pay, that's the bipartite, you have government and organized labor. With the daily minimum wage, they were able to agree on the 22%, and the base pay, that's when they agreed on the 23%. So basically, they looked at several factors. They looked at the current economic condition, they also looked at the inflationary trends, they looked at macroeconomic indicators, they looked at rent, they looked at accommodation. All those factors were put together before they were able to arrive at the various conclusions. Now, on the base pay, look at what the Sector Minister of Employment, Ignatius Bafo, said, making the announcement on the base pay.
Okay.
At the end of our negotiations at the tripartite level, we agreed that the minimum wage be reviewed upwards by 22%, i.e., from 14.88 cedis to 18.15 cedis. Subsequently, the Public Sector Joint Negotiation Committee between all unions within the public space under the single spine and government also entered into negotiations to determine the national base pay. I'm happy to report to you that in some few minutes past, after a very difficult meeting, taking the current state of the economy into consideration and also taking into consideration the agreement that as a nation we have with the IMF, and in making sure that we stay on course in achieving all the targets that we've set to achieve for ourselves and also to get all the benchmarks right, we have concluded that the national base pay be increased by 23% between 1st January 2024 to 30th June 2024, and subsequently an additional 2% increment will be added to the 23%, making it 25%. So from July to December 2024. So in terms of absolute figures, till the end of this year, the national base pay will be 14.74 cedis, but from 1st January through to 30th June, it will move from 14.74 to 18.13, and subsequently move to 18.43.
Right. So that is the Employment and Labor Minister. Right. Now, we know that he indicated that it was a negotiation.
Right.
What amount or percentage did Labour go to the table with?
Okay, so Labour appeared before the team with 45%, judging from what they got from the daily minimum wage. Because the technical committee submitted a 45% increment for daily minimum wage. So Labour, based on that percentage, appeared before government with a 45%. Government began with 10%, moved to 15%, 18%, and 19%. Now Labour was compelled to move from 45 to 40, but unfortunately they could not get the 40 or the 45%. So they had to meet government halfway. That was when they got the 23%. Now, actually, Labour is not happy with the percentage because there's a sharp shortfall. One look at last year where they got the 30%, as again this year getting the 23%. Labour is assumed not happy. Because even listening to Dr. Yaba, who's the Secretary General of the TUC, then Isaac Bampo, the Executive Secretary of CLOGSAG.
Okay.
We are confident that when the time comes for government to implement, there will not be any hassle. And I would like to assure you, as organized labor, this country is for all of us. And that is why we have agreed with government. And I want to advise Honorable Minister that we should continue to work together because we still have issues to resolve around wages for single span salary, those who are on the single span salary. And I'm hoping that this negotiation will not end those discussions. We should continue to discuss and agree and resolve the issues before the next round of negotiations.
Government upon government, whichever color it is, I've always complained, no money, no money. They've given us all sorts of reasons. They have jaws, but we have resolved that this must change. Next round of negotiations, government should have enough money to even give us double living wage. And to do that, I think we have to look at the wastage in our system. We as Labour, we are not going to wait for another year before we start talking about these things. I think we start talking about these things now. And we have resolved that any which way, freedom must come.
And Daniel, all these in percentage terms, what does this mean to the ordinary public sector worker?
It has a dire impact on the salary of the average Ghanaian worker, especially when working in the informal sector. That is when they agreed on the 18 cedis, 1.5 pesos. So it has moved from 14.88 to now 18. Clearly, if you work for a private entity, it means that your employer should not pay you anything below the 18 cedis. Okay. Obviously, you must take above the 18. But when you look at the current economic trend, the inflation, which is currently around 30%, as against the 23% we government announced, you realize that the average worker, exactly, you have lost the purchasing power parity. Wow. So clearly, you are out of business. For a worker, clearly, you are going to be affected.
Daniel, thank you so much for your time. And Daniel Lopoko is our Labour correspondent.
All right, so more of this, especially these discussions and conversations, will be live tomorrow here as we bring you the coverage of the budget. Still on issues regarding the economy, though, Ghanaians may have to brace up for the introduction of some new taxes as the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, appears before Parliament on Wednesday to deliver government's last fiscal policy to the House of Legislature. Members of the Minority Caucus have hinted that the Finance Minister intends to raise some 11 billion Ghana cedis through the imposition of new taxes in the 2024 budget.
We have told him that we think that the people of Ghana have been taxed so much. The tax burden already is very, very high. And so it will be inappropriate to come with new taxes. Rather, the minister should look at cost cutting in terms of expenditure. The issue is not just about revenue. I've heard a lot of people talk about revenue. Yes, it's good to raise revenue, but it's also important that you look at the expenditure side as well.
The suspended Fiscal Responsibility Act, none of you are raising questions about it. In the Fiscal Responsibility Act, he will resurrect it. Like Jesus Christ, it has to come back again because there must be fiscal discipline, work towards fiscal consolidation. And you see, when you come for a review and amendment to a suspended act, itself will be a problem. So Ghanaians should expect a review of taxation.
Right. Let's go to Zoom now. We've been joined by economist Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie. Doc, good evening. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, Martin, and thanks for having me.
It's been a very tough last 2 years. Specifically this year, it's been really, really tough. The finance minister is going to Parliament tomorrow. From the perspective of an economist, what are your expectations in terms of the deliverables the finance minister is to make?
Well, it is an undeniable fact that we're still within the IMF program. And so the government had its own PC-PEG program before presenting to the IMF for funding. And so the budget cannot be different from the PC-PEG and cannot be different from the IMF program. We all know the first pillar in the IMF program is fiscal consolidation. And so we will expect the budget to address that. In other words, we should try to narrow the gap between revenue and expenditure, so you can either raise the revenue and or reduce expenditure. I think a number of issues have come about in terms of whether there will be new taxes or not. I don't expect the introduction of any new taxes, and if nothing at all, if there will be a new tax, then it should be rather look at the areas that are doing well in the economy and tax them. So for any economist or anybody to recommend raising revenue through taxes, you must look at the areas of the economy that are going well. And if you ask me, I'll mention the extractive sector, I'll mention the telcos. But for the DDEP, I would have mentioned the banking sector. But at least these two, the extractive sector and the telcos, are doing well. And so I believe that if there's going to be any tax, they should rather review downwards the ones in the sectors of the economy that are not doing well, i.e. the manufacturing sector. We know how hard they have been hit, and therefore there should be some tax relief there and go and introduce the taxes in the sectors of the economy that are doing well. The IMF program, as I expect the budget to address, is also about growth. But for the 2024 being election year, it would have been basically an austerity measured, budget just trying to ensure stability. Yeah. But this budget may have, in addition to stability, may have as part of its plans to grow the economy, to expand the economy, to employ more people. Of course, because we know it's an election year, so we expect the government expenditure to go up. I would advise that the expenditure should be on productive sectors like the agriculture sector, because we want to ensure food security. Like the energy sector, you want to ensure energy security. Like the manufacturing sector, you want to ensure that people get jobs. Like the tourism sector, and then the sports, where we have a number of our young people really patronizing those sectors. So there are a number of reforms in the sector to grow the economy, to create additional jobs, and to spend on prudent, enterprises. And they continue to provide safety nets to cushion the poor and the vulnerable in society.
You mentioned expenditure and spending by government, and that's where my next question is, headed towards, where there have been concerns about government spending, especially on salaries, looking at the labor force. Government, after today's negotiation with Labour, says that the percentage increase has been split 23% and 25% later in 2024 because we are on an IMF program. How much further would you expect government to cut down on its expenditure, and in which specific sectors would you expect these to be?
Well, Martin, it's difficult to call for a cut in expenditure, and I'm choosing my words carefully because of the rigidities in the budget. There are so many rigidities. Now, rigidities are referred to the statutory payments, like the compensation to employees. The government cannot say that they are going to cut salaries of workers. In other ways, we are even asking for increment. Another area that is to be difficult for the government to cut is the transfer to government units, the GET fund, the NHIL, the National Assembly Common Fund. Already they are struggling. Another area that will be difficult for the government to cut, which they have done anyway, is through the reduction in interest payment, also through, as a result of the DDEP and also the external debt exchange program, if successful. So really, looking at these three main items that consume the entire revenue and expenditure, it's difficult for the government to say, I'm cutting here, I'm cutting there, because these ones are rigid in themselves. They are statutory payments. You cannot do much about it. The areas that the government can cut are the, discretionary expenditure. And even with the discretionary expenditure, he's rather going to borrow to finance the discretionary expenditure. So we just have to preach prudence and priority. I think the government should prioritize prioritize manufacturing, prioritize energy, tourism, and stay focused on these areas because we don't have much money.
Right.
When it comes to that expenditure, I think what many Ghanaians are looking for is efficient use, the prudent use of our funds. And there wouldn't be even much savings even if the government reduces its size.
Right.
It will just be a signal to Ghanaians that they are listening to Ghanaians.
Doc, certainly early days yet. We'll be engaging you further tomorrow when we all hear what exactly it is that's captured in the budget. Thank you so much for your time. Dr. Odu Owusu-Sarkodie is an economist and definitely one of the voices you'll be hearing as we further analyze what the budget holds for all of us.
And the reintroduction of road tolls is likely to feature in the 2024 budget. Government stopped the collection of road tolls in November 2021 after presenting the 2022 budget. In the 2023 budget, the Minister of Finance announced the return of road tolls on some selected routes as part of revenue measures. Ahead of the presentation of the 2024 budget, George Queenan has been interacting with some motorists, pedestrians and hawkers at one of the two toll booths on the Accra-Tema motorway.
Before the presentation of the 2022 budget in 2021, which captured the total abolishment of road tolls in the country, facilities like the toll booth would have been choked with vehicles trying to pay their tolls whilst plying public roads and bridges like the Accra-Tema motorway. Government made some justifications for arriving at this very decision. Some of them included heavy traffic at the toll booths and also the conducive environment created for the hawking business. And when the toll system was scrapped, the e-levy was introduced. Unfortunately, government failed to accrue the needed revenue. It's a reason this year has announced the reintroduction of road tolls. But we are here to really engage motorists, to engage pedestrians and even people that used to hawk at one of the toll booths on the Accra-Tema motorway. What they make of this decision by government?
They should bring the toll booths back again because it's helpful. They've abandoned it for some time now. It has no use. And then in other way, it helps the disabled because I think before they abandoned it, there were these disabled guys that they work inside. It's going to help them and it's going to create opportunity for them too as well.
What was the initial reason behind the cancellation of the road tolls to introduce e-levy? Has the e-levy been helpful so far? No, we are not seeing any improvement. Look at the state of the motorway, very bad. So if they should bring back the toll, I think that revenue can be used to cater for the motorway.
E-levy and you'll be an e-levy. Toll the automatically will be out here, but driver no because you're too much.
Everyone indirectly pay road tolls, unlike the e-levy. So it is good to bring it back.
A major question pedestrians and motorists want an answer to is that what would happen to e-levy if the road tolls are reintroduced? But it's just a few hours for the presentation of the 2024 budget. And so let's wait and see whether or not the reintroduction of road tolls will be captured. George Queenan, TV3 News, Accra.
In more news tonight, the Minister for Health, Kweku Agyeman-Mano, has come under intense criticism after informing Parliament that the Finance Ministry has secured 50 million euros in the local funding for reconstruction of the General Hospital. The minority, however, criticized the Minister for failing to provide clear timelines on when work will resume. Here's a report by Parliamentary correspondent Komla Kluche.
2020, the General Hospital was demolished after hospital's administration in 2015 reported severe structural problems. President Akufo-Addo on August 10, 2020 cut short for the commencement of the construction of the General Hospital redevelopment project, but work has yet to start. Residents of La and its environs have been angered over the undue delay. The government has been justifying the demolition and the delay thereafter.
The contractor who was supposed to do the project is the person who actually pulled down the facility. We had handed over site. He needed to clear the place to start new work, and there was no way that we can do that hospital on that same land without pulling down the facility. And that is how come the project was pulled down. We've never seen this type of hiccups up and down in managing any project in the health sector so far as since I became Minister for Health. So we have had serious challenges with La General Hospital. Through the efforts of the three-man committee, the Minister for Finance has now identified funds locally to continue the project with the same civil works scope but a reduced price of 50 million euro. The contractor indicates that once the funds hit the account, they will remobilize to site within 1 week. There are materials on site worth over $8 million that the contractor has put there to recommence work with. They were mobilizing, they actually mobilized, they were on site when suspension happened. Now we have all these materials there, there are very few skeleton staff on the site, and now that they are going to get back to site, we believe the project will move very quickly. We trust that this project will be carried out in earnest and completed within the 24-month duration as originally stated.
And I thought that the minister was coming to give us hope. Mr. Speaker, the statement by the minister gives no hope. In fact, he has actually said nothing. Mr. Speaker, by the actions and inactions of the government, it clearly means that they were not committed to the project.
Both the majority leader and trade minister in the past week have contradicted themselves on exactly what has caused the delay in the project. Former minority leader and chief whip took the minister on over his lack of certainty on the project.
But when you say he has identified funds, is it from the consolidated fund or you are coming with a loan? If you are coming with a loan, should we expect 50 million euro or 68 million euro as was approved? So, Minister, come well. The people of land deserve better than what you have come to do.
Honorable Haruna Iddrisu, when you make reference to infrastructure fund and you are commending former President John Mahama for the infrastructure fund, Agenda 111, what did you do with the infrastructure fund you so claim to have set up? What did you do with it? We dreamt of Agenda 111. You should rather applaud us for this. Speaker, I'm not seeking to raise the temperature unnecessarily. But let's commend where commendation is due. You get up on your feet and run down a minister who has come to tell you the truth. That cannot be honesty.
Away from Parliament, a former Vice President of the United States of America, Al Gore, has urged leaders on the continent of Africa to improve on measures to fight corruption. Speaking in an exclusive interview with Alfred Okansi, he indicated improvement in levels of transparency as a sure way of winning the fight against corruption in all forms.
And for a lot of the young people, especially because they are not seeing the impact of some of these things that you talk about, partly as a result of issues with corruption and so on the continent, and I'm sure that bothers you as well. The increasing cases of corruption and so on, and the seeming lack of commitment by leadership to fight it. What has to be done?
Well, when I was Vice President of the United States, I sponsored international conferences to fight official corruption, and of course it's a problem in all over the world, but when it gets to the levels of hyper-corruption, then it changes everything. One cause of corruption is what the economists call a resource curse, when too much of a country's wealth is in one resource that is extracted in ways that enrich the wealthy elites, and the poor people don't get any benefit from it. And the wealthy elites sometimes become vulnerable to accepting bribes in order to keep this system going. In Nigeria, 86% of the balance of payments with the rest of the world economy comes from fossil fuels. 0.6% of the employment that gives income to the people is related to fossil fuels. So it drives inequality that becomes hyper inequality that feeds corruption. So getting away from this dependence on dirty and poisonous fossil fuels is one of the ways to fight against corruption.
And that's one of the many ways that can be done. What other ways, in your view, do you expect that the leaders on the continent must commit to fight corruption?
Well, transparency is the most important solution. There's an old saying that the best disinfectant is sunlight. When the people can see what is going on, then those who are tempted to be corrupt are scared to continue their nefarious activities.
And the full interview will air on Ghana Tonight at 10 p.m.
All right, so do make a date. Let's take a quick trip to the Ashanti region now, because at least 13 criminal cases at the Kumasi High Court have had to be adjourned due to the absence of jurors. The jurors have abandoned their duties over unpaid allowances dating back to August 2022. Though government is reported to have released monies to clear 5 out of the 15 months allowance arrears, there is no certainty over when they will resume official duties.
The trial of a police inspector, Ahmed Chumesi, over the death of his girlfriend, Veronica Dapa, and the trial of a 25-year-old tailor apprentice over the death of a KNUST Level 200 student at Sewa, and many others were all adjourned due to the absence of jurors, even though the accused persons, state and defense counsels were all present in court.
From 6th of November till today's 14th, we have mixed 13 cases. I think coming Thursday we'll have about 9 cases. So if my members are not agreed to come, meaning you just imagine.
The decision of the jurors to absent themselves from court is delaying justice delivery. This, they admit, is unfortunate, but insist is necessary.
My people don't have money to come to the court. As I told you, some of them live as far as Mankran, so it's far from Kumasi. You see, every day come to the court. He spend 300 Ghana cedis every day, you see, to purchase fuel. Others travel far to Edum. After the court, they will take another 3 cars back home. So if this allowance that will support them is not there, how can they come?
The Ashanti Regional Accountant of the Judicial Service has disclosed government has released funds for payment of 5 out of the 15 months allowance arrears. Leadership of the jurors, however, are not certain when they will resume, since they are still owed from January to October 2023.
Don't forget that they have borrowed money to purchase fuel. They have borrowed money to pay for their TNT. So this little money that has come, they are using this money to pay. So tomorrow, if we meet tomorrow and they are saying that we are expecting even part of 2023, and once we don't have 2023, we are not coming to court, there's nothing I can do.
In more news tonight, as part of their support and contribution to the well-being of victims of the Akonsombo and Thorn Dams flooding, management of Rehoboth Properties have donated items to the hardest hit districts within the Volta region. The items are worth over 45,000 cedis.
The donation is in line with the company's social responsibility of contributing to lessen the burden of victims of the flood disaster, which has rendered many homeless and destroyed properties worth millions of cedis. Presenting the items on behalf of the Rehoboth Social Housing, the sales and marketing manager, Francisca Chikata, said the offer was part of their contribution to the worst affected areas.
We've given them bags of rice, gallons of oil, packs of Ombo washing powder, bathing soap, lots of items, tissues, tea rolls. We are tin fish and tin tomatoes. We are giving to the people here in this time so that it can support them.
The Manklalo of the Mepe traditional area Togbi Koshi Nego, who received the items on behalf of the victims, was grateful for the gesture.
We started from home, so some of our sons in abroad started putting things together, so we were able to buy some water to supply to them. And so far we have received over 30,000 bags of sachet water from some of our sons and various groups, organizations, NGOs, and sympathizers. We are very grateful that you are here.
Still watching News 360 on TV3. Stay with us. Business is right after this break. Welcome back to News 360. Time now for business. Michael is looking, you're okay. Yeah, so I mean, tomorrow is going to be a big day for the business team and all of us here. Budget is going to be read. One critical component is inflation.
Exactly.
What's happening there?
Well, another decline. I'm sure we're all happy to hear that the rate at which prices are increasing is slowing down. Doesn't mean prices have dropped.
Okay, there's a difference in that.
The disclaimer. Hello there, good evening, welcome to the business segment here on News 360. My name is Michael Obodu. Straight into our top story, as inflation rate fell more than anticipated to a 14-month low in October, with the annual rate dropping to 35.2% from 38.1%, which was recorded in September. The lower inflation rate provides some breathing room for the Bank of Ghana to keep borrowing cost unchanged or reduce it when its Monetary Policy Committee meets later this month.
The latest inflation rate is the lowest since September 2022. According to Ghana Statistical Service, the deceleration was driven by the softening in food prices.
The slowdown in food inflation is sharper as it decreased by 4.6 percentage point between September 2023 and October 2023, relative to the 1.6 percentage point drop for non-food inflation, as it declined from 29.3% to 27.7% for the month of October 2023.
Inflation for imported items and locally produced items dropped by 2.9 percentage points.
From a locally produced item and in an imported item perspective, we recorded a 2.6 percentage point drop between inflation for imported items and inflation for locally produced items, with inflation for imported items 37.0% and inflation for locally produced items 34.4%.
The slowing down of inflation eases policy rate hike pressure on the Bank of Ghana when its Monetary Policy Committee meets later this month. A reduction in the policy rate could help to stimulate economic growth, which has been slow in recent years. The Bank of Ghana will need to carefully consider the latest inflation data when it makes its decision on interest rates later this month. The bank will need to balance the need to keep inflation low with the need to support economic growth. If the central bank decides to keep interest rates unchanged, it will be a sign that it is confident that inflation is on a downward trend and that the economy is starting to recover.
Ghana's stock exchange market has been ranked the third best performing market on the African continent, following positive indications by the exchange's composite index, which is up over 30% this year. Managing Director of the Stock Exchange, Abena Amwa, made this known on the sidelines of the exchange's 33rd anniversary celebrations.
Ghana's top ranking comes as good news to the exchange, following the impact of the domestic debt exchange program, which led to the drying up of activities on the fixed income market. General Manager of the Ghana Stock Exchange, Abena Amwa, says the increase in the composite index, which tracks the performance of shares on the equities market, is an indication of market recovery.
If you had invested across the stock market, your return so far this year would have been 30%. On price appreciation, and this performance is the third best performance in Africa in terms of stock exchanges. So we're very happy for that. There are many companies also whose prices have gone up significantly this year.
The exchange has had to adopt new strategies and deploy digital tools to enhance trading on the market.
We think that when we do that, together with the investment educational programs that we are doing with our partners like the young investors, as people understand what it means to invest, many more people will also show up and improve their liquidity on the market.
For the year 2024, a more positive outlook is predicted with the introduction of a new commercial paper market to improve trading.
We saw in the past there was a lot of problems with people doing fixed deposits and then they lost their money. We are organizing that market into one that we will show transparency, we will have regulations, issuers will have a way to report on the activities to investors, creating more confidence. This is a product we think the market will embrace very well and serve as one more way for well-run companies in Ghana to also raise short-term capital.
Now, the Executive Secretary of the Importers and Exporters Association of Ghana has called on the Finance Minister to reinstate value-added tax on domestic airline tickets and real estate sales, which were abolished in 2017. He argued that the reintroduction of the taxes would generate significant revenue for the government. He made the call during the address to the media at the UPSA pre-budget dialogue.
The government in 2017 abolished a VAT on aviation tax. We are saying that governments should be able to introduce that VAT back. Taking a flight here to Kumasi with the abolition of the VAT is 2,000 Ghana cedis in and out. Just from here to Kumasi. It is the rich people. If you are going to quick to go and do your business and come back, business meeting and come back. In the developed countries, the taxes, the richer, the more. But in this part of the world, you rather abolish the richest people taxes and rather imposing taxes on the ordinary, even including your watchman sitting at the Ministry of Finance, who cannot afford to buy a real estate 2-bedroom suite at the airport, can he?
Now, the Institute for Energy Security, IES, is projecting fuel prices to go down at the second pricing window starting November 16, 2023. Following the price falls recorded for gasoline, gas oil and liquefied petroleum gas on the international market, it is expected to bring domestic fuel prices down at the pumps.